Chelsea fans could be forgiven for wondering what on earth is going on at their club at the moment. More than £1 billion spent on players since American owner Todd Boehly arrived, yet their fans are still calling for more investment in the squad, with the Blues struggling in mid-table. No European football and no real identity, it seems. The man whose name is on everyone's lips this month, though, is Conor Gallagher, a potential outgoing, one of their own, as the Chelsea fans sing. Tottenham are interested. It remains to be seen whether or not he'll leave this month or perhaps in the summer. Sunsport and sources understand this morning that it is unlikely he will leave this month, with Pochettino keen to hold on to him for at least the rest of the season. But I'm delighted to say that joining us is Sunsport's Chelsea correspondent Andy Dillon to give us a bit more of a detailed look at the situation in West London. Dills, great to speak to you. Let's start off with the transfer stories. You had an exclusive one in the paper about Kepa and him fearing he'll have to be returned from his loan at Real Madrid after losing his number one spot to Andre Lunin. But let's start with Gallagher. Will he leave this month, I suppose, is the question on all Chelsea's fans' lips. And is it a good idea if he does?
Well, Conor Gallagher is kind of Chelsea's problems in a nutshell, or Chelsea's issues in a nutshell, because we've had in recent past, we've had Mason Mount and go a bit further back, Antonio Rudiger, who were just allowed, or Rudiger allowed to just wind down his contract. Mason Mount had to be sold with a year left on his contract. Conor Gallagher has around about 18 months left. So Chelsea are in a real sticking point here. Do they cash in now and get some money for him, because come the summer, the price will probably drop considerably? Or do they give the guy a new contract? With the way he's playing, everyone, who goes to watch Chelsea, every Chelsea supporter will probably say, give the guy a new contract. He's playing really well as captain, even though he's considered not to be like a John Terry or a Frank Lampard kind of leadership figure. He just does what he does. He's not the most sparkling or gifted footballer, but he's there, and he's a proper anchor in the middle of that pitch. His position in the team in itself provides that kind of role. And at 23 years of age, he's actually fairly senior for this young Chelsea team. So they're in a real problem here, because the supporters are crying out for a striker. They know they need a striker because Nkunku's been injured again, so he's out for some time. Is Broja going to do it for them? He himself, he had a great time on loan at Southampton, but is he up to it at Chelsea? Nicholas Jackson's gone to the African Cup of Nations. I don't see him so far as being a brilliant finisher. Great team player, though, so far, what I've seen. So they're going to have to raise some money. Gallagher, being homegrown, is pure profit because they didn't pay for him in the first place. So they've really got to weigh it up. And Pochettino might sit there and say he doesn't want him to go, but Pochettino will be confronted with a balance sheet and may have to. He said some weeks ago, I asked him pointedly myself about he's the kind of guy you want to keep. When January comes around the corner, these are the questions you start asking the managers. Is he integral to you? Because he's been playing so well. If he keeps it up, it's going to be hard to let him go, because he's propping up that team. But they may have to. So Pochettino could say, I don't want to lose him. He also said how important he was going to be in the Carabao Cup ties coming up, because players like Gallagher, they understand the importance and the significance of the cups, FA Cup as well. So this is a real dilemma. So Pochettino could say what he likes, but he may have to bite the bullet.
Yeah, well, you've reported recently, Dills, that Chelsea, the big wigs at the club and the people that make these decisions would be happy to let Gallagher go for the right offer. What do you think, if it was, say, in the summer, like you say, when he'd only have 12 months left on his deal, what sort of sum do you think it would take to get him out of the club then?
I reckon you're probably looking, let's say it took 45 at the moment. It's going to drop. It's going to be 10 million short of that, isn't it? Probably even 30 million. All depends, of course, whether or not he keeps up this terrific run that he's on, and whether or not a team like Spurs think that he'll improve them, and so much changes by the summer. But if there's a feeling in Chelsea that this guy won't keep this up, and that come the summer he maybe will have faded a bit, then they'll have to take quite a considerable cut on him. So if you look at it from, Todd Boehly or Bedad Egbali's point of view, is maybe looking to balance the books. and get some cash in. They're thinking, sell him now. We could sell a guy who's captain of Chelsea, who's in a great run of form. This is probably his most marketable time of his career. So it's just Chelsea have done this in the recent past. They've let contracts just dwindle, and they've not managed to sort them out. I mean, I first reported about Mason Mount in the November before the World Cup, the day he flew out with England. He still hadn't sorted a contract, and it was kind of wave goodbye to Mason Mount with England and wave goodbye to him from Chelsea if you're not careful. And he went because players want to know, they want to feel loved. And the problem, sorry to bang on about Gallagher, but the thing about academy players at a lot of clubs is they feel they get undervalued. So they see players coming in from outside. They'll see Mudryk coming in, 62 million for starters, on an 8-year contract. And who knows what Gallagher's being offered. They're probably saying, well, you're not on that kind of money because you've been at the club all this time. So they there's so much jostling to go on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one on the Conor Gallagher. Just briefly then, before we move on to your other exclusive transfer story about Kepa with Conor Gallagher, is it fair to say, given that Chelsea have spent more than 100 million on Moises Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, and then £58 million on Romeo Lavia from Southampton? I appreciate he is injured, and there was a bit of a sense that they did that as much to stop Liverpool from getting him as that they needed him in their own team. Is it fair to say, at least then, Dills, for any Chelsea fans watching, that Conor Gallagher, whilst Mauricio Pochettino really values his importance in the short term, given all the things you've outlined there, long term, with those midfielders and the money they've spent, he's likely not in Pochettino's plans beyond perhaps the second half of this season?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that would have been the dream scenario. But what hasn't happened is we haven't had Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo looking like 230 million quid worth of midfielders together, have they? Caicedo has... there's not much of note that he's done, Enzo Fernandez, has he looked like 106 million quid since he signed almost a year ago? He's been here almost a year now, and has he, he drives them on a bit, but does he look like a player who is taking that team by the scruff of the neck? He doesn't, and that's where it's gone wrong. Pochettino talks about they need time, but Enzo Fernandez won the World Cup with Argentina and then came here as, at the time, the most expensive British signing, I think, wasn't it? 106 million quid. But it's just not clicked as quickly as they wanted. So they're having to rely on players like Gallagher. Truth be told, they probably would have had him out the door in the summer. That would have been, and brought some money in. That's what they would have done. But they've not been able to do that because these two haven't really clicked. And Lavia, like you say, has been injured. I think he's barely played, hasn't he? Got injured in his first game back anyway. So this is where the whole thing, when we talk about Chelsea being unfamiliar, it just this never used to happen. And you look at the players they've lost. Look at Kante, the player that they were supposed to come in and replace. Would you say either of those two has replaced N'Golo Kante?
Not even close, is it? And like you're saying as well, are either of them providing anywhere near as much value as Declan Rice, 105, 106 million pound player who's gone to Arsenal, as he is there? There is an argument, and I think reports have suggested that if Chelsea weren't such a shambles at the time, the homecoming for Declan Rice to go back to Chelsea, whose academy obviously left, probably would have been on. Have they missed a trick there? Probably, yes. Listen, Dills, talk to us then. More Chelsea news, sort of incoming, but another return. Your exclusive story in the newspaper about Kepa Arrizabalaga. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, Kepa Arrizabalaga is another such a curiosity. World's most expensive goalkeeper, but has never quite fitted in at Chelsea. And if you think about it, kind of dropped them in it a little bit last summer. Pochettino came in, and there were lots of noises about this is it. I've had a chat, and I think he's quite pally. I can't remember the guy's name. Quite pally with one of the coaches there who's on Pochettino's staff. They had a chat, and it all looked to be plain sailing. Then, of course, Real Madrid come in. Courtois got injured, so Real Madrid come in for him, and he just jumps. He tells Pochettino, I want to go. Pochettino's left in the lurch. He goes off and makes a lot of noise about wanting to stay there permanently. So all the signals were that was the last you'd see of Kepa. But of course, He's had an injury, but he's also not been playing as well as he thought he might. Competition comes in Andrew Lunin, and he's now number 2. And now he's got a genuine fear that next year, instead of him rivaling Courtois for the number 1 spot at Real Madrid, it's going to be Lunin. And as a result, Courtois is going to be sent back. And that is a personal disaster for him because Chelsea have moved on. Chelsea signed Robert Sanchez, no sooner had he gone, and have now brought in Georgi Petrovic, who's been playing really, really well, really kind of impressed people. So they've got 2 goalkeepers. So where does Kepa go? So he's got genuine worries now that this second half of the season is going to be a big, big time for him to try to, he's got to try and impress Carlo Ancelotti and try and shift himself back in between the posts at Real Madrid. And that's not an easy task. And then he comes back on his 180, 200 grand a week wages next summer with a year to go on a contract.
Yeah, the dodgy situation, sort of mismanaged, you feel, a little bit by a club, but in this instance by a player as well. A couple of mistakes in the Spanish Super Cup as well, which haven't helped his cause.
But this is where kind of the long contract thing with Chelsea, that this business model they've had can backfire. He's still under contract for another year. I think he came in 2019, something like that. It's like a 6-year contract. So much changes in football. So many things just, you can plan and plan and plan as much as you like. And then suddenly something happens. Courtois' injury has triggered all of this. And it snowballs like like a domino effect. And now we've got Kepa could be coming back. It's kind of like a Lukaku. It's Lukaku light, if you like. He's not criticised the club. He's not had a go. He's not said he doesn't want to play. But it's another player who doesn't want to come back, who is due to come back.
Yeah, Lukaku light indeed. Right, final couple of deals. Transfer news-wise at Chelsea, Ian Martson has gone to Borussia Dortmund on loan, and David Fofana has returned from Union Berlin. 17 games he played there, struggled a little bit, and reports suggest that Sevilla have declared an interest, but that Chelsea would prefer him to stay in the Premier League, with Burnley understood to be keen. What do you make of those two, and what do you expect particularly for
well, they're all part of this.
Time?
Yeah, they're all, this is Martson and Fofana. They're all part of the stable of, young horses, if you like, that Chelsea are trying to expand. They're moving into other clubs abroad now and try to copy Manchester City. And so they've always had a lot of players out on loan. They've always followed that principle. So these guys have just been hoovered up during this massive spend, and they need to go and develop. I mean, Martson, when he's played for Chelsea, he's never looked really out of place, but he's just not getting the time at the moment. And same for Fofana. So they'll go off and they'll either try to, mature them, come back as men, or they'll think, let's cash in on them now and let's try to recoup some of the money. So it's such a massive squad, and it's such shifting sands at Chelsea that, I could be in the first team next, Will. I could be playing for them next week. Then I could be sent on loan.
Right, Dils, just wrap up for us then. What do you expect from Chelsea for the rest of the January transfer window?
For the coming month, I would expect Chelsea they'll go for a striker. Whether they'll get a striker, I don't know. There's been stories about Evan Ferguson at Brighton as well, but Brighton meant to be asking something like 100 million quid. They're not going to spend that. So it's, it all revolves around the Gallagher, whether they can sell, whether they can offload a few players and bring in some of that money, because they do have to be wary of FFP. They clearly do need to have a striker. Pochettino keeps telling us all they're doing is talking about loans for young players at the moment. But if they're not looking for a striker, then, you have to wonder why and what is going on up there.
Absolutely. Well, Sun Sports correspondent for Chelsea, Andy Dillon, there bringing us all the latest comings and goings at Stamford Bridge. Stay with the Sun on socials and on YouTube for all your latest transfer news this January.